Welcome to this episode of the Psychedelic Bookshelf, a special series for the psychedelic states of America. I'm Jim Tate, and you can find me at silencia.com. That's P-S-Y-L-E-N-C-I-A, silencia.com, where there are links to my Substack, Kykeon 23, and my podcast, Inside the Revival. I'm really pleased today. I've been wanting to talk to Graham St. John for a long time. He's a cultural anthropologist, a biographer, and one of the foremost authorities on psychedelic culture, which I'm fascinated by, electronic dance music, which I don't know much about, but transformational movements, which I'm fascinated by. He's authored or edited 10 books, and that body of work exists at the intersection of cultural history and the study of altered states. In my opinion, his most ambitious work to date is what we're going to be talking in depth about today, Strange Attractor, the hallucinatory life of Terrence Mckenna, which is the first full-scale biography of Terrence Mckenna, available wherever fine books are sold. Graham, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jim. I really appreciate it.
I love reading this book. And I'll add, it feels like a labor of love. We've been waiting for someone to write a deep biography of Terrence Mckenna, a new step forward, and now all the rest of us are off the hook. If Terrence had not lived, we probably would have needed to invent him. So let me ask you first, why Terrence Mckenna and why now? Why'd you write this book, Graham?
Well, and I'll start with thanks for the accolades. I mean, it is surely I mean, this is the first of many biographies. I have no doubt, and this is a project that I would hope encourages many other people to join the conversation, as they no doubt will. I think Terrence is so fascinating because he's really spoke directly to so many people, through his life, and of course in his afterlife. Because I mean, he was a figure who has the unique fate of having his voice recorded for several decades, and on so many occasions that we have trouble sort of keeping up with that. I mean, it's remarkable that we don't even know currently how many recordings there are, and there's something like over 500 hours of that. And I know that his daughter Claire Mckenna is working on an archive now, which we can talk about as well. But it's just that he spoke so directly to so many people that there are effectively countless, authorities on Terrence,
Right.
because he's become this phenomenon that everyone has an opinion about.
Let me do a little aside here. From Terrence, you mentioned the first of a number of biographies. Who else do you want to write about?
Oh, at the moment, I only really want to write about Terrence myself.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Okay.
if I write, I figure my project as a biographical project that's not complete.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Um, the title, Strange Attractor, it kind of strikes, I love that title. I'm drawn to that title, just like I was drawn to Gollamore's book on DMT, Death by Astonishment, which was a quote from Terrence Mckenna, which is fascinating. And so, how did you pick that title, Strange Attractor? Because it works on different levels.
Yeah, it does work on different levels, and that's why I suppose I landed on that. I mean, initially, the title was going to be something as boring as Terrence Mckenna,
You're right.
and obviously his name's still in the title, but he himself used that terminology, which is connected with chaos,
Right.
math, or maths, depending on which continent you're from.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was, was an obvious title in the end. I really, he did play with paradoxical titles. True Hallucinations,
Yeah.
his memoir is another example of that. And so it was really, it ended up being an obvious title. Obviously, it's also the title of, the name of a publisher. It's a well used
Well,
terminology.
you mentioned that it is also part of the terminology in chaos theory, that there's such a thing as a strange attractor. And Terrence was a strange attractor on both sides of it. People are attracted to him, and he was attracted. I mean, it was, really a great title. Um, how long did it take you to research and write this book, Graham?
So this project is about 10 years in the
I
making.
bet.
Certainly the last 5 or 6 years were more or less full time. Um, that it's a project that sort of snowballed and grew from strength to strength because it didn't start off as a biography. It started off as I don't know, something more like a chapbook or something that grew out of my
Mm,
previous book, which is called Mystery School in Hyperspace, a cultural
right,
history of
DMT.
DMT. And so it's going to be a kind of magnification of the chapter in that book that addresses the Mckenna brothers' approach to DMT and their, so-called experiments at La Chorrera and the aftermath of that. And one thing grew. I mean, one of the first people, in fact, the first person I interviewed for this project, who is the person the book is dedicated to, and that's Rick Watson, who I interviewed in 2018 in London.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Rick is no longer with us and has moved to the next level about 2 years ago. He was instrumental and was very forthcoming with a great deal of information over the years. And he's a remarkable figure in his own right, in that, a very, very humble figure who, unlike his buddy who he knew from high school, Terrence, or
Right.
Terry, or Ter, as he called him,
Yeah, Terry.
never sought the limelight. And so my book is, in some respects, certainly an introduction to uh, Rick, as much as it is a biography of Terrence. And Rick is someone I think that we'll, learn more about. He's a fascinating figure, and had lifelong correspondence with Terrence. And so the project just snowballed from, one person to the next, and ended up, the next thing I have 80 conversations with 80 interlocutors, friends, family, lovers, distant acquaintances, um, and, colleagues in discourse over the years.
Graham, one thing I really liked is that as much as I've read about Terrence, either through YouTube videos of him or podcasts of him or his own writing, um, the work that you uncovered about his early life and the relationships between him and Dennis when they were young and the father, those kind of details, it kind of leads to an understanding of kind of the contradictory nature of his life moving forward. Inability to show himself totally in a lot of different ways, and just that dynamics. It paints him as a really human being, and as opposed to some variation of the machine elves themselves in human form, which a lot of people like to put him in. In these 80 people that you, or plus that you interviewed, was there something that surprised you that you heard, or
Oh, many surprises. I mean,
tell me some
the
of the,
biographical projects. I mean, this is what inspires people to write biographies. The deeper you go, the more interesting it becomes, and then it becomes a dilemma as to how much, what material should go in the book. Um, and this is certainly it's a scholarly project. And just talking about Rick Watson, for example, there was Rick has, he did share with me his unpublished short stories and
hmm,
stories that, some of which include commentary on their first trips together back in the mid 60s. In fact, their first trip on, on Morning Glory seats
yeah,
in San Francisco and Golden Gate Park in 1964. And this is just a fascinating. It's fascinating anyway, given who's involved, because he's talking about him and his mate Terry. And but what makes it even more intriguing is the quality of Rick's own writing. And
hmm,
And in that story, we learn that they were introduced to morning glory seeds by none other than the young Jim Fadiman.
exactly.
Uh,
That's fascinating,
yeah,
that connection.
yeah,
Yeah. And by the way, as an aside, I'm in the early stages of writing a book on morning glory seeds, which is a fascinating story, as well as salvia. The lesser known, the lesser known of these compounds, especially out of Mexico. One thing that fascinates me about the McKenna brothers, and you referred to it a minute ago, and then in great depth in your book, I think it was in 1971, their experience in the jungles, living on psilocybin mushrooms, and entering a state that many people would consider psychotic or temporary psychosis. And they each wrote a book about that. Dennis's was The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss. Terrence's was, I guess, True Hallucinations, right? Is that? Yeah. Um, and so, the insight that they each give, which can occur to many people with psychedelics, is you enter a belief system. Uh, and then after a period of time, you realize, well, do I really believe that? Or was I crazy for a while? Or is this real? Or all that kind of stuff. And they both go into great detail. And the fact that both of them are able to discuss that in detail, that's a hard thing to write about. But after you think that you have unlocked the keys to the universe, how do you come back and cook oatmeal tomorrow morning, basically? So, that's probably the experience that most people are aware of for the McKenna myth, for lack of better
yeah,
things, I guess.
yeah. It's true. This is La Chorrera in Colombia,
Yeah.
in the Amazon in February March 1971, and the notorious events of the March 4th. And this is an experience that Terrence essentially spent his life coming down from.
Yeah.
But we can also go back several years because they were in the Amazon searching for an organic source of DMT, and which Terrence had smoked in February 1966, care of Rick Watson. There's Rick appearing again, and it was from that moment on that Terrence was on a quest to discover the meaning of the tryptaminal mysteries, and that led them to the Amazon. And as the story goes, instead of really finding exactly what they were looking for, they stumbled upon the mushroom, the psilocybin
Fields
benzus.
of mushrooms.
Yeah, growing
And
in dinner plate size, to use his terminology.
yeah, great story told by the both of them. Uh, Terrence occupies really an odd space. He's dismissed by many scientists, revered almost religiously by his followers. So, how do you, when you're writing, how do you navigate about being critically honest and really giving him the intellectual respect he's due? You know, there's some tension in there. How did you approach that in your writing?
Yeah, well, I mean, Terrence is fascinating because he's nothing if not consistent, and there
Mm,
is certainly a consistent tension. And I mean, he's such an enigmatic figure, and it's almost like a definition of an enigma, because he is, as you say, a figure who was and remains, a cultic or even occultic phenomena in the underground, and yeah,
mm,
a figure who's regarded as a hero, a cognitive libertarian. But from the point of view of psychedelic science, he's a preposterous anomaly. He's regarded as something as of a persona non grata, to the point where many people at many of the psychedelic science conferences these days wouldn't even know who he was,
right.
and yet he remains this almost a cult-like figure, and that really fascinates me. That there are there's a certain kind of zealotry that seems to circulate around Terrence, in that he was a figure who was well read and was able to retrieve so much information and synthesize it, and took speak directly to people um, about dropping Jung, for example, or
Yes.
Whitehead, another philosopher, Heidegger, in in a fashion that can sort of stand in for the critical attention to those thoughts among his fans. And in other words, you don't need to read Jung because Terrence has read Jung for you.
I believe his background was Irish, correct?
Part of his background, yes.
Yeah, part of, and obviously he not only kissed the Blarney Stone, he the Blarney Stone kissed him. That guy could rap. You mentioned the psychedelic conferences, and so now a lot of the psychedelic elders have become celebrities, which is very strange because they lived underground, especially the chemists like Leonard Picard, but now and went to prison. But now many of them are heralded and feted. Um, some of them have been ignored, but they should be remembered. Yeah, I wonder what Terrence. He would probably be the if not the keynote speaker. He wouldn't be the opening band. He would be the lead band that people would be coming to see. I believe. Yeah, he has not been replaced. He has not been replaced. Yeah.
Yeah, at the same time, he was someone who, was an outsider to academia from an early
Right.
age. I mean, despite being, he eventually got his Bachelor of Science from UC Berkeley, I think in 1975, which was over a 10-year period. But subsequent to that, he really resisted academia, and I think he rarely went to academic conferences, and effectively became the main event at essentially what became his own events down in
Sure. Yeah.
Palenque in Mexico. And so he may have been invited to many of these conferences. I'm not sure if he would have wanted to attend because, he was a guy who also spent the last few years of his life attempting to set up his home base on Hawaii, where he
Yes.
would be, speaking from home, and that was his whole endeavor towards the end of his life to get off the lecture circuit and
Yes.
and increase the virtual traffic.
And had a native botanical garden, growing all kind of things. I believe a lot of his books and papers were destroyed in a fire there, correct?
Yeah, well, so my book does talk about several fires in the last chapter,
Yeah.
which is called Metamorphosis, and there was one key fire in California in 2007 that did destroy the library that was bequeathed
Hmm.
to Esalen. And the intriguing thing about that is that we don't really know what was burned in that library
Yeah.
because in that fire because Esalen hadn't cataloged that content before the fire. And but what's interesting now is and I mentioned before that Clea Mckenna has initiated an archival project, which
That's
is
important.
undergoing right now,
That's
which I
important,
encourage.
Graham.
I encourage people to support that. I think you'll find that at Lux Natura. I'm not exactly sure of the exact website, but check
Okay.
out Lux Natura.
Um, we're going to have to dive into what is time wave zero.
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that.
I know it. Well, if it's not a mathematical model, I think you describe it as a mythopoetic construct. So I'm going to show my ignorance as I try and explain it. He thought that at a certain point that he understood waves of or I guess waves or frequencies of what he called novelty, of the rise and fall of epics and eras and civilizations and things like that, and believed that he could predict a certain place and time where a lot of things were going to change. He identified those. And so, how am I doing so far, Graham? Is that kind of
Oh, sounds okay to me.
okay? Yeah. And so
Keep going.
he clung to that for a long time, well past after the date had changed. And so that's almost a rabbit hole people can go down. Excuse me, or it could just be seen as something that tells us about how his mind worked, trying to put together mathematical models. And, we haven't even discussed his stoned ape theory, which is still controversial. Maybe some truth in there. We don't know. But just how his brain worked, putting things together and coming out with unique and novel belief systems or approaches to what the hell is going on here.
Yeah, I mean that's a good rendition. One of my chapters, which is called "The Time Wave," attempts to unravel and
Mm,
I do emphasize that I attempt to unravel the meaning of the time wave, at least in terms of how that appeared in the course of his life.
yes.
Because essentially it was his opus, it was his lifelong opus, and it was a combination of so many things, including his interest in religion. And you can see evidence of his fascination with the Tao and
Teaching.
also
Yeah.
Catholicism.
Yeah.
in the Tao, in the sense that he was fascinated with the dissolution of boundaries, and Catholicism in the sense that he was interested in eschatology and endings, and it's not just particular to Catholicism, particular to Abrahamic religions. And he had this lifelong, fascination with endings. But of course, the fascination with endings is also a fascination with new beginnings. And so you really, start to uncover his metamorphic, thinking that I think pervades his ideas. But these are not ideas that he ever, put down or ever had the opportunity to put down in any concise fashion. And I'm not sure that even had he lived the last 25 years, he would have done so.
Mm.
Um, but I suspect had he lived the last 25 years, we would have had, some clearer ideas. Obviously, he would have lived past 2012 because,
Right.
as you were leading towards then, the key end date in his mythos was 21st of the 12th, 2012. And but he left the building 12 years before that. We don't know how his thoughts on that
Hmm.
might have changed had he lived in those 12 years. Um, but a lot of people become fixated with the mathematics and the
Yes.
as opposed to the mythopoetics and the mythopoetic logic.
Right.
I think that you can find so much of his dreams and wishes and foibles in the Time Wave. You can also find his mother, buried deep at the headwaters of the Time Wave as well.
Mm. Um, there's so many things that he did. One that even if he did nothing else, would have received ongoing respect. And that's when Terrence and Dennis figured out how to cultivate psilocybin mushrooms and wrote a small book that spread across countries, if not the world. Here's how you can grow them at home. That pushed the needle for a lot of people. They had figured out how to do it. Maybe others had, but they published documentation around it. I just want to put that thumbtack out there that he just wasn't a philosopher. He was doing these other things too throughout his life.
That that's right. I mean, even if that was his only legacy, that's significant enough in its own right, or the legacy
Exactly.
of the brothers.
Exactly.
And we shouldn't forget Kat Harrison, who also had a role in the production of that book as well, from certainly from an artistic point of view.
Right.
And she's another person who I haven't mentioned yet, but we were privileged to have conversations with her, and she shared stories that sort of permeate throughout the book. And just in relation to that, I mean, she was someone who was and still is a deadhead, and had attempted to drag Terrence to Grateful Dead concerts, including shows that were in the wake of the publication of the Growers Guide. And we know that um, Jerry Garcia and others in the band had exposure to this guide, as did many of their fans. So within a few years, you could see
Mm.
at these shows the impact of this cultivation techniques and knowledge permeating the underground.
Well, and now there are probably hundreds of organizations or companies, certainly in the U.S., who are building uh, mushroom grow boxes they'll ship to you and syringes full of spores. I mean, just to watch that. Um, from my understanding, Terrence was always skeptical of LSD, but championed psilocybin and DMT. What was his skepticism around LSD, if that was true? Was it too
Well,
chemical, too synthetic? What was?
yeah, he certainly had an aversion to what he regarded as, laboratory produced psychedelics, and he would often draw attention to, his friend Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphogenic resonance, and would claim that there's just not enough history behind these substances to so he would pontificate quite a lot in relation to that, but he still had some formative experiences with LSD, and some of those are treated in the book. Yeah, his penchant was tryptaminal, quite obviously.
And even his DMT phrase, machine elves. Boy, that everybody uses that phrase now. I mean, he could see something or experience something, put a name on it, and everybody said, that's good enough for me. So,
Yeah, and a lot of that has a lot to do with his becoming a sort of a spokesperson or a frontman for rave culture in the early 90s, certainly in the UK and then elsewhere. I mean, the fact that one of his what he thought was an interview and a badly performed interview ended up being the content for a hit single on the UK singles chart that went to number 18, which was called Re-Evolution by The Shaman, is is speaks to that influence, and the fact that then it subsequently became one of the most sampled individuals in the history of electronic music, with a lot of samples. So, for instance, he would often do this thing where he would replicate these speech patterns that he would experience during his so-called heroic doses on mushrooms, and it became a performance routine, and a lot of that was sampled in electronic music production. So yeah, this terminology certainly pervaded the cultural underground through rave and post-rave culture.
um, from my understanding, his first love was marijuana. As far as daily or
Probably his
hourly.
last love too.
Yeah.
Yeah, pervaded his life. I mean, I think he was a late starter. It wasn't until he was like 17 or 18 that he was introduced to cannabis, and that was in San Francisco, and yeah, that was a lifelong habit, and a habit that he claimed. I mean, he was a guy who could smoke the most, the strongest weed and hold forth
Yes.
before multitudes, where multitudes would fade and desiccate. He was the one who was who could really was fired by cannabis.
Graham, let me ask you some personal questions, if I may. Where were you born? Where do you live?
I was born in Geelong, Australia, and that's where I'm normally based now. Yeah. Well, not in Geelong, but Melbourne.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by, as different compounds are discovered and embraced, whether it was DMT or 5-MeO from the Sonoran frog, these kind of things. And again, my research in the morning glory seeds and salvia in Mexico. And so it got me wondering a couple of months ago, what other compounds are there out there that we don't know about? And I ran across some in Australia in the outback. I don't want to write about it. I don't want to name it because I'm scared the American corporations will do what's happening with Ibogaine, take it over and do a cultural economic extraction of the whole thing. But I imagine there's some indigenous consciousness altering compounds in the outback that we don't know about yet, or maybe you know about.
Yeah,
Thoughts on
well, I probably know about as much as that as you do, or you may know more. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation that uh, sources of DMT, acacias,
Mm-hmm.
were and continue to be used by native population in Australia. Um, but you're right, there's caution required. I mean, we can be somewhat ambivalent about Terrence's own role. I mean, he did visit Australia in 1997, and I write a little bit about that in the book. I've also written a separate essay about that that's published in the Entheogenesis Australis journal this year, which sort of puts the reader in the back seats of Terrence's grueling tour, 10-day, 2-week tour of Australia in 97, and this was a time when he'd been exposed to Salvia divinorum in the years previous to that, and he'd basically become its biggest spokesperson, its biggest spruiker, and he would invariably indulge people in his thoughts on that, and became one of its first biggest sort of
Mm-hmm.
spokespersons for this plant, for this mint, which is active in the microgram
Yeah. The,
range,
the world's the world's most potent naturally
and,
occurring psychedelic.
and within five, that's what the point I'm trying to get at is that within 5 years of his presence in Australia, Australia became the first country to ban salvia or
Mm.
salvinorin
You,
A in the world.
in the U.S., it's not even on the controlled substances list because what happened here is all these YouTube videos. Well, if you talk to people in the psychedelic ecosystem here, they've either never done it or they've done it once and then say never again because they all took essentially massive overdoses of it. But there are some people who use it traditionally. Some people often speak that these different compounds have a gender behind them, and that salvia is female but very shy and must be approached on tiptoe, as opposed to kind of the American thing, which is more is better. So I think they knew that the way it was being done in the U.S., there was not much concern for abuse because most people only did it once because they took, uh, obviously, however you define it, a massive overdose.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and what's interesting is that when this was being made public and when Terrence was spruiking salvia, this was right around the time of the emergence of the internet, and
Mm.
which really, you know, characterizes Terrence's own emergence. I mean, he surely regarded the advent of cyberspace from his earlier years. I mean, he would say that he imagined it into existence, and which was one of his you know one way to look at Terrence is that he was the stand-up philosopher. He was a comic, and
Yeah.
he exploited all of the classic techniques of the comic, and such as admitting your own flaws, like in this case, megalomania, and it rarely failed to make people laugh. And this is one of the fascinating things about Terrence is that, I mean, we can talk about him as being a comic, but he was also, a freak, an exile, an outlaw, an anarchist, an alchemist, a shaman, a bard,
Yep.
something of a scientist, a surrealist. It was all of these things all at once, which has made it notoriously difficult to approach him as a biographer, and I'm sure that but I would hope that my project um, gives some impetus for others to join the party.
Do you travel much to the U.S.?
I have done in the past. I haven't been back since 2022, which would have been my last time at Burning Man.
Oh, okay. Well, we hope you won't wait another long period like that before you come back to visit us.
Well,
Maybe.
actually, I should say that was the last time I was there before I was there last year. In fact, I was there for my book launch last year. I forget about that.
Oh,
So
really?
I did a bit of a book launch in October last year in
Yeah.
Berkeley in New York.
You know,
Yeah.
of course, the big kind of annual or every 2 years now, psychedelic science is going to be, our next one is next May in Denver. Please come to that one. We'd like to meet you in person, and whatever you think about the conference or the organization behind it, uh, everybody shows up. It's kind of the Burning Man, and you have serious scientists and chemists, and you have people wearing uh, indigenous clothing, even though they were born in Milwaukee. You got the whole gamut there. So it is a fascinating thing. Uh,
I'd love
yeah.
to be there if they have me or have me back because I did the last time I was there was well that would have been 2015 when I
Well, yeah.
was launching my previous book.
Yeah.
But I'd
Well,
love to come. Love to.
um, uh, I don't know about, I'm sure you have some opinions on what they call the Renaissance, especially in the US. Um, Companies being bought for $1 billion because they license one compound. I mean, this has become an industry in itself uh, around retreats. Uh, uh, and it's a to me it's a petri dish, and a lot of things are yet to shake out. But one of the things I'd like to hear what your thoughts on is the attempt of some pharmaceutical entities trying to remove the psychedelic experience from these compounds and say, well, it's still going to fix your anxiety or PTSD. You just don't have to turn over the rocks and see the lizard underneath there or see God underneath there. But do you think the psychedelic experience, do you have any opinion, is necessary?
Uh, Absolutely. And I suppose this is one of the reasons why I'm being compelled to produce the books that I have, including Terrence's book, because I'm pretty sure that Terrence would be outraged,
Yes,
by the many of
that's a
these
good,
developments.
yeah.
And
I'll,
because in fact he was a spokesperson for psychedelics, he was a spokesperson for cognitive liberty, the the freedom with which we should be permitted to explore our own minds.
Yeah.
And I think that is being curtailed in many respects. And I think that he would, if he was around, he would have strong feelings about that.
Yeah. I was at a meeting recently with the professor and chemist Dave Nichols, who has legally made more psychedelics than anybody who's ever lived. He made the MDMA for the MAPS trials and Johns Hopkins, all those kind of things. And he was asked that question, and he felt the psychedelic experience, maybe you could remove it, but there'd be a cost to removing it. That the experience itself was important. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And, one of my other interests, which is more of my main interest, because it's usually the source of income for me, and that is as an anthropologist researching festivals,
Yes.
So-called transformational festivals. This includes Burning Man, but also other events in Australia and in Europe, events like Boom, which are, and Azora, where I've worked for the last 15 years. We have a cultural program there. And these events are contexts for safe, in many respects, contexts for safe exploration of consciousness. And I think that they are, have been essential in the lives of many people in terms of the transformative impacts of a variety of plant medicines and psychedelics.
Do you think, or who do you think, what psychedelic figures who have not had a book like this written about them deserve a book like this to be written about them?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I've been so. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Jim Tate.
No, no,
but
that'd be a 6-page comic book. Yeah. No, of course, there are many books about Albert Hoffman. Um, and of course, it's almost a chat GPT 2-paragraph response to a prompt about his life. Much different life. He was just a chemist who later in life ran across something, kind of interesting. I'm really fascinated the details about Wasson and his trips into Mexico in search of the 3 magic plants of Mexico and all the fallout from that. And the people who went with him, and it was partially funded by CIA money. At least his second trip there was, and his belief around potential Athenian psychedelic ceremonies and things like that. So I think he deserves, more attention. We have these elders, many whom have left, but the people that knew them are passing away also. So I'm glad you wrote your book, Strange Attractor, in which you can find people that really knew Terrence McKenna before they are gone. Yeah, absolutely.
Just back on figures that haven't really received the biographical attention. Do you think that the so-called Johnny Seed of Acid has had
Hubbard
appropriate biographical attention?
No, is that who you're talking about, Hubbard?
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by him. That guy, again, a lot of contradictions. you know, uh, creating weird technology when he was a teenager. Uh, uh, and then he was the Johnny Appleseed of LSD. He traveled with that leather briefcase and turned on thousands of people at LSD. He would show up at your door, sit down, and leave 24 hours later. I mean, he really, really, uh, and very few people even know anything about him at all.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there has been I haven't read it, but it looked kind of thin effort to create a biography of Hubbard, but it would obviously require a lot of work. I have chatted with some folks who all agree that that would be a difficult project, but it's certainly a project that deserves because he was everywhere. He had a hand in everything, didn't he?
And he had it from Sandoz. He had pure LSD. Uh, yeah, his background and so much of it was secretive. Yeah, that is a great tale that is yet to be told. Something else that kind of fascinates me because I love history is that looking back at the 60s and 70s in the US, there are people who now are considered saints and people who are considered devils. So history's being rewritten. Of course, Lynn Picard is considered an elder saint at this time, even though he was an informer for the DEA and the Customs Department. And he made that in court, and he admits that. And then the person who flipped on him, Skinner, who was widely loved, the psychedelic thing, the Shoguns loved him. They loved that guy. He later basically went crazy. He's in prison forever and did horrible, torturous things to other humans. And so you have this weird mix of history being rewritten. Anybody who was in the psychedelic underground, certainly the chemist, really to protect yourself, you almost had to have some relationship with customs or the DEA. Just like Timothy Leary ended up talking to the DEA and giving them information, basically to get out of prison. I don't think anybody ever went to prison because of him. He gave them old information that was no good. But it was a time in which there was a very thin membrane between above ground and underground. Shoguns knew everybody in the underground. I mean, there was just things like that. Other things I'm fascinated by, not as important as Hubbard, but there was a guy named Petaluma Al. Petaluma Al is the guy who, his name is not really known. He was never identified really in court. He was never charged. He was never arrested. But he's the one that took all of Picard's acid, much of it went to Europe, and brought back gigantic amounts of Dutch currency that they had to wash at the casinos in Las Vegas. Who knows where that guy is? So those are anecdotes and asterisks in the bigger story.
And the bigger story involving Leonard Picard himself, we haven't really seen. I've read one biography of him, and I was pretty disappointed, and I'm quite sure he would be as well. I mean, this is in the there's a style of biography which is the kind of style that I don't adopt. I mean, my approach has been somewhere between being, Inspector Clouseau and Captain Willard chasing Colonel Kurtz up the river.
Yeah.
But as I always say, I'm not an assassin. And some of these biographical approaches are essentially character assassinations.
or
you know,
character
finding
canonizations.
all the dirt that you could potentially find and then manufacture some more.
Yeah,
And I don't think these are true. But I mean, a good biographical project allows the reader to think for themselves,
yeah,
and that's what I've attempted to do with this. I mean, it is also an intellectual biography, so it does have 1,600 endnotes.
I love those. What
Some people hate endnotes, but you don't have to read the endnotes either.
I read them. I love those. Um, Before I let you go, Graham, what are you interested in right now? What is the strange attractor for Graham St. John?
Well, I did mention that my biographical research on Terrence is never, I mean, a biographer's work is never done, and this is it's like a bottomless project. And I'm really fascinated with what Claire Mckenna is turning over in terms of archives because, your biographical project is only in many respects as good as your sources. And there's a lot more sources in terms of journals and letters that I didn't even know existed, but which are being collected and archived, and I understand will be eventually available in an institutional repository, and that's going to be really, really important because I only ever knew that there was one biography of Terrence's, which was his 1971 biography of his, recounting of his trips to La Chorrera twice that year.
Mm.
And there's so much more. So I think there's so much more to be said about Terrence's iconoclastic metaphysics. And so I'm interested in going deeper. I'm interested in going deeper into the cultic dimensions of Terrence's fandom. And so that's going to preoccupy me for probably for a little while.
Graham,
And I'm
thank
interested in
you.
hearing about your excursions into Morning Glory seeds and salvia.
Yeah, I'll send you. His salvia book should be out in just in a couple of weeks. Fascinating compound. It's a ghost plant.
Great. What's the
Doesn't occur
title?
naturally. We don't know who tended it. We don't know who propagated it. So
What's the
much is
title of your book?
um, uh, it is. I'm gonna think because I've changed a few times. It's going to be called The Little Book on Salvia Divorum.
Okay.
That's it. Um, uh, Graham, thanks for joining me today on this inaugural series, the Psychedelic Bookshelf for the Psychedelic States of America. Appreciate your time and your work. Keep shining the light and keep the faith,
Thank you, Jim.
brother.
Thanks for having me, brother. And I'm privileged to be the inaugural person you've chatted with. And yeah, that was a worthwhile chat. Thanks for having me.
I enjoyed it.